While we think of cannibalism as a savage tribal practice, the most civilized kings and queens of Europe were secretly feasting on human flesh, blood, and bones to cure their daily ailments. Doctors called it corpse medicine. They believed that the human body contained a spiritual life force. By eating the dead, the living could absorb their vitality and cure everything from headaches to epilepsy. The obsession started with the ancient dead. Wealthy Europeans paid a fortune for mumia, a brown, bitter powder made by grinding up the stolen, dried-out bodies of ancient Egyptian mummies. But dust wasn't enough. Physicians claimed that fresh was better. If you wanted to cure a blood disease, you needed the warm, red liquid flowing straight from the neck of a dying man. The logic was twisted but simple, like cures like. If your head hurt, you ate a crushed human skull. If your blood was weak, you drank the blood of a strong, executed criminal. It wasn't just eaten. It was worn. Human fat was rendered down like butter and sold in jars. People rubbed this corpse grease onto their skin to treat nerve pain and gout. The strangest recipe came from the East. The mellified man, an elderly donor, would eat only honey until he died, then be soaked in honey for a century, turning his corpse into human candy. King Charles II of England didn't just take the medicine. He made it. He distilled his own King's Drops, a potion made from human skulls, which he sipped regularly to maintain his royal power. This demand created a horrific black market. Grave robbers stole bodies from cemeteries, and executioners became wealthy merchants, selling the warm bodies of prisoners piece by piece to the waiting crowd. How did an entire continent convince itself that eating people was medical science? The story of corpse medicine reveals the dark, desperate, and disgusting lengths our ancestors went to just to stay alive. Let's step into a European pharmacy in the 16th century. Amidst the jars of herbs and spices, you would find jars labeled skull, brain, and mummy. It was a time when medical science was a mix of superstition and desperation. Antibiotics didn't exist, and death was always around the corner. To fight death, they believed they had to consume death itself. It was the golden age of medicinal cannibalism. The most popular item was mumia. Traders raided the tombs of Egypt, stealing thousands of mummies. These bodies were brought to Europe and ground into a fine powder in industrial mills. This powder was mixed with wine, chocolate, or molasses. It was prescribed for almost every ailment, from internal bleeding to menstrual pain. Imagine sipping your morning cocoa, knowing it was thickened with the dust of a dead pharaoh. The demand for mummies was so high that Egypt ran out of stock. So, unscrupulous merchants started making fake mummies. They would take the fresh bodies of executed criminals or beggars who died in hospitals, dry them out in ovens, and coat them with bitumen to make them look ancient. Unsuspecting rich people were actually eating the dried flesh of local peasants, thinking it was ancient medicine. For those who wanted stronger medicine, the execution scaffold was the place to be. When a criminal was beheaded in Germany or Denmark, the crowd didn't just watch. Spectators would rush forward with cups in their hands. They would pay the executioner to fill their cups with the warm blood spurting from the neck. They drank it right there, believing the spark of life was strongest at the moment of death. The executioner was often a town healer. After the crowd left, he would take the body and dismantle it. The fat was sliced off and boiled down to make salves. The skull was crushed. Even the hair was sold. It turned the justice system into a butcher shop. The criminal paid for his crime with his life, and then his body paid the executioner's salary. It was efficient, but morally bankrupt. One specific item was highly improved: usnea. This was the moss that grew on the skull of a man who had died a violent death and was left unburied. They believed this moss had absorbed the victim's trapped energy. This moss was scraped off the bone and put into the noses of people with nosebleeds. It fetches a higher price than gold, purely based on the superstition of violent energy. This wasn't a peasant's superstition. It was a royal hobby. King Charles II paid £6,000 for a recipe to distill human skulls into a tincture. He called it the King's Drops. He drank this alcohol and bone mixture regularly. It is ironic to think of a king, sitting on his throne in velvet robes, sipping a drink made from the head of one of his own subjects. The most disturbing recipe is found in Chinese medical texts, the mellified man. It required a supreme sacrifice. An elderly volunteer would stop eating normal food and consume only honey. He would bathe in honey. Soon, his sweat, urine, and feces would turn to honey. Eventually, he would die from this sugar overdose. But his journey as a medicine was just beginning. After death, the volunteer's body was placed in a stone coffin filled to the brim with special honey. The coffin was sealed for 100 years. Over the century, the honey would slowly dissolve and preserve the human flesh. When opened, the body had become a confection. This human honey was sold to heal broken bones. Sounds like a fairy tale, but it was treated as serious science. In the 17th century, a recipe for brain pancakes existed. It involved mashing the brain of a young man who had died violently, mixing it with wine and horse dung, and letting it rot for 6 months before distilling it. This vile concoction was used to treat epilepsy. The theory was that the brain matter would calm the storm in the patient's head. The smell alone must have been unbearable. The irony was palpable. At this same time, European explorers were traveling to the Americas and condemning indigenous tribes for being savages because they practiced ritual cannibalism. Yet, back home in London and Paris, these explorers were eating mummy powder and drinking blood. They justified it by processing the body into a medicine, creating a mental barrier that made their own cannibalism seem civilized and scientific. Thieves used human fat for a different purpose. They made thieves' candles from the fat of an executed man. Legend said that if you lit this candle in a house you were robbing, the inhabitants would fall into a deep sleep and not wake up. It wasn't medicine, but magic. It shows how the human body was viewed not as a person, but as a raw material for tools. In 1679, a Franciscan pharmacist created a recipe for marmalade of blood. It involved collecting warm human blood, letting it dry into a clot, and then cooking it with sugar and spices into a spreadable jam. This was given to patients with lung disease. Imagine spreading human blood jam on your morning toast for health. The culinary preparation makes the horror of the act even more unsettling. This obsession with blood fueled the vampire myths of the time. While villagers feared vampires who drank blood to stay immortal, the aristocracy was essentially doing the same thing. The line between a vampire and a wealthy patient was very thin. Both believed that the fluid of life could be stolen from one person to extend the life of another. Reality was scarier than fiction. So when did this stop? As the 18th century progressed, the Enlightenment brought better science. Doctors began to realize that eating dead bodies didn't cure diseases. It actually spread them. The practice of hygiene emerged. The idea of eating a rotting corpse became repulsive rather than medical. But the transition was slow. Mumia was still listed in the Merck medical catalog as late as 1909. We might judge them, but are we innocent? Today, we perform blood transfusions and organ transplants. We use skin grafts. We are still transferring parts of one human to another to save lives. The difference is we use live donors and sterile needles, not executioner's cups. But the core concept that the human body is a source of healing for another body remains exactly the same. In fact, a form of medicinal cannibalism has returned. Some modern mothers choose to eat their own placenta after childbirth, dried into pills or cooked, believing it restores nutrients and prevents depression. While controversial, it shows that the instinct to consume human tissue for health is not entirely gone. It is a dormant belief that resurfaces even in our high-tech modern world. There is a biological reason why we shouldn't eat people, prion. Eating human brains can transmit kuru, a fatal neurodegenerative disease found in tribes in Papua New Guinea, causes tremors and death. The Europeans were lucky that their medicine didn't wipe them out. They were playing a game of biological Russian roulette every time they swallowed a spoonful of skull drops. Did any of it work? Likely only as a placebo. If you believe a magical mummy powder will cure you, your brain releases dopamine that might temporarily ease pain. Also, the sheer shock of drinking blood might have jolted the nervous system. But mostly, patients survived despite the medicine, not because of it. The human body is resilient, even when fed a diet of horror. The demand for bodies also jump-started modern anatomy. Because legal bodies were scarce, doctors paid thieves to resurrect the dead for dissection. This dark trade eventually led to the Anatomy Act, which allowed doctors to legally study bodies. So, in a twisted way, the era of corpse medicine paved the way for the real medical science that saves our lives today. This history forces us to look at our own miracle cures. We buy detox teas, strange supplements, and unproven therapies. We are just as desperate to avoid death as the Victorians were. If a doctor told you today that a pill made from a unique biological compound could save your life, would you ask where it came from? Or would you just swallow it? The story of corpse medicine is not just about gross habits. It is about fear. The fear of pain, the fear of losing a loved one, and the fear of our own mortality. When faced with death, morality often disappears. We will do anything, eat anything, and pay anything for just one more day of life. That is the tragic human condition. Next time you see a skull symbol on a poison bottle, remember that for hundreds of years, that same skull was the medicine bottle. What we define as poison and cure changes with time. History is a graveyard of bad ideas, and corpse medicine is perhaps the deepest, darkest grave of them all. It is a reminder to question what we are told is healthy. From the sands of Egypt to the execution squares of London, we have consumed our ancestors in a misguided quest for health. We turned kings into cannibals and graves into pantries. It is a stomach-churning chapter of history that proves truth is often stranger and much grosser than fiction. If eating mummies made you feel sick, just wait until you see how our ancestors used to drill holes in their own heads to release demons. The history of medicine is a horror movie that actually happened. You won't want to miss the next episode of Ancient History, where we expose the brutal reality of ancient surgery. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you are the first to know about the weirdest facts from the past. Let me know in the comments. Would you have tried the mummy powder? Thanks for watching and stay curious.